So welcome. For folks who don't know me, my name's Dylan Penner, he, him, based in Ottawa, unceded Algonquin territory, and I'm the comms lead with the Seniors for Climate. So thanks for joining us for this workshop, and we'll be going over the overall highlights of doing media outreach, and ideally this will be helpful for those of you who are organizing through Seniors for Climate and Allies for Environment Week in June, as well as other uh, events and actions you may be organizing down the road as well. So essentially, what we're hoping to do is have a bit of an interactive discussion, and hoping to share some learnings around key things related to media outreach and engagement techniques, tangible skills development for folks who are doing organizing in communities and trying to get media coverage for that organizing, and building local capacity for media engagement. And the workshop itself will likely be an hour and a half, depending on the discussion. Might be a little less than that, but we'll see how it goes. And what we're aiming to cover is a bit of an overview, uh, walking through some written skills, some verbal skills, and some other odds and ends that might be helpful as well. And what we wanted to start off with was just a bit of an overview of the full range of media outreach, and so wanted to get a sense from you. Some of you may have done some media outreach before or have a sense of why we do it, and just wanted to get a sense from you. Why do we do media outreach? What's the purpose and the benefit of it? And feel free to just chime right in.
Are we trying to get a specific message out there to get people to read it?
Yeah, that's right. That's definitely part of it. Other
It's
thoughts?
definitely to amplify our voices,
Hmm.
and it does it many times over.
To grow
That's
our
right.
movement, to grow, yeah, to
Yeah,
spread,
that's right. So more people become
increase our
aware
numbers.
that there is a movement that they can ideally join. Yeah.
Yeah, also to build relationships with individual reporters,
Yeah,
individual
absolutely.
journalists who will sometimes phone you out of the blue.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Yeah, definitely. All of those things, and really it's a really valuable tool in the activist toolkit, and there are range of different kinds of media outreach we'll get into a little bit in this workshop. And also wanted to just get your thoughts briefly on what are some realistic objectives for media outreach when we're trying to connect with journalists, with media. What are we hoping for in terms of outcomes of that?
I guess the right message or the message that you're wanting to convey is written correctly. All the facts are correct, and you're not misquoted if you're being interviewed, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, all of those things. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out 100% that way, but it's nice. It's nice when it does.
Well, if you're trying to break the silence,
Hmm.
sometimes the very best thing is to get a absolutely horrible denunciation of your action and cause by some right winger, which you then can respond to.
No,
So
this is very true.
basically,
Yeah.
um, all pretty much, with minor exceptions, all coverage is good coverage.
Hmm. No, it is a good point. We often generally do try and avoid negative coverage, but it's also worth giving people the benefit of the doubt that there are a lot of folks out there with good media literacy and can see through a hatchet piece when one comes along. Not necessarily everyone, but a lot of folks on our side will often see what is written between the lines in pieces like that. And so what do you think are some of the possibilities and limitations of taking this kind of approach in relation to the movement organizing that we're doing? What are some of the the challenges that we come up against in terms of media engagement and what are the limits to it? What can't it do?
Well, just getting any kind of coverage at all.
Hmm.
Um, and also getting coverage in a media landscape that's shrinking. We used to have three newspapers, two weeklies and one daily. Now we have one weekly newspaper. We used to have an office, a CTV office. Now we don't. We just have a stringer who's here. So, and we don't have any CBC coverage at all. So it's just a question of trying to find actually alternative methods, like through Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky and word of mouth and posters and every other kind of media outlet you can use.
Absolutely. And I thought one thing that would be helpful to go through in relation to this, and it does vary a little bit depending on the type of media outlet we're talking about that'll I'll get into in a moment. But Becky, I see you've got your hand up, and then I'll get into what I was going to mention.
I was just going to say challenges competing with other news these days.
Absolutely. That's a perfect segue. It's actually what I was just
Okay.
about to mention. No, it's so in just taking a step back from that, but I'll get back to that in a second. It's helpful to understand a bit of a day in the life of a newsroom, and th this is a helpful way of sort of visualizing or keeping in mind when is a good moment or when is a good time to reach out to journalists, but even more than the timing, just understanding and whenever it is you're talking with a given journalist, having a bit of an understanding of what they're likely dealing with outside the conversation you're having can really help connecting with them in a way where they'll be keen to talk with you that time and hopefully other times as well. So often from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. journalists will be story prospecting. From 10 to 11:30 reporters will be sitting down pitching story ideas to editors and producers. And 12 to 3, sometimes till 5, they'll be chase producing, following leads, doing interviews, doing that kind of thing, and in some ways structuring the story a little bit, and they'll do filling in the blanks more from 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 for writing and or if they're doing a TV piece or radio doing editing. And again, this is just sort of broad strokes. This will vary regionally. It'll vary between urban and rural communities. It'll vary between TV and radio and print and online. But in a general sense, there is a cycle to the day, a cycle to the week that is really helpful to understand. And you can also as part of what you're doing in terms of media outreach, put some time into understanding more specifically what the media cycles are uh, specifically for the outlets in your communities that you're trying to connect with. Because if you're trying to pitch a story and it's the time of day where your journalists you're trying to reach is in an editorial meeting, you're not going to have much luck even reaching them. Or if they're like 5 minutes to deadline, they're not going to want to talk to you. And so if you are consistently like calling them up right at their deadline, then they're going to be less inclined to want to talk. So So all that to say, it's helpful to just have a sense of that, and of course, related to what was said just before, all of that can also just get thrown out the window with some kind of wild card, some kind of all-consuming breaking news story. You know, you know what the range of things can be, where whatever else that was likely going to be covered is just not even a story anymore, where either the government's about to fall or what have you. And so that's also really important to keep in mind in terms of just the importance of being agile and recognizing, even if you had a plan that was essentially written in stone in terms of media outreach for, a given Tuesday, and then the government is proroguing Parliament, you're probably going to want to just hit pause on that and give it a couple of days, because you're going to be wasting your time. They're not, unless it's directly related to what's happening. And we'll get into that a little bit. Like there can be ways, depending on what you're doing media outreach for, to tie it into a wild card kind of story and make it relevant. But that even when it is directly relevant, if the wild card is something related to the federal government, even if what you're doing is related, it's still an uphill battle, because the media will tend to focus on government and opposition party voices over social movement voices. That's just the reality, and even more so now with all the cuts that have been happening in recent years. So all that to say, we can have our plans, but be prepared to throw them out the window and try again tomorrow or next week, depending on what it is we're working on. So that's a bit of overview, and wanted to get into some written skills, and there's a few different kinds that are really valuable. The basics being who, what, when, where, why, and sometimes how, and WTF, and really thinking of the materials that you're preparing, or whoever it is on your team is preparing for outreach to media, whether it's a press release, whether it's, talking points for pitching to them. Try and think of it in terms of a story, so that you're making the journalist job easier. So like they don't have to construct the story, or spend as much time on constructing the story. If you already present them, here's what's happening, here's who's doing it, here's when, all of those very basic things of essentially treating a press release like you're writing your own article in a way, so that it stands alone as a story in itself, and that will go a long way to getting interest and engagement, and ideally coverage as well. And one sort of a bit of an aside that can be a useful skill to practice is, and this may seem a little odd just by me saying it, but writing outreach materials on issues you're not familiar with. And yes, we like to, obviously we're working on climate issues, and we're all active in it and have a fairly good understanding of it, but it is also a wide range of topics within that topic. And one of the things that can come up from successful media engagement, as Eric was mentioning earlier, is sometimes journalists will come back to us out of the blue. It's not always us proactively reaching them, but in fact, when we're successful in doing media outreach, cultivating those relationships, then when a story emerges, they may come to us, but it may not always be precisely part of what we've focused on, and so you can make a quick decision if it's like say you're working on, primarily renewables, but the journalist comes to you with a story about a new pipeline or something like that. That's maybe something you're less familiar with. You can make an assessment. You can say you don't have enough information to comment on it, but you can also make an assessment, depending on when they want to do an interview, because you don't need to be an expert on everything. If there is time permitting, you may be able to do a bit of quick research using reliable sources from allied organizations and news sources and that kind of thing. So it is worth cultivating that as a bit of a practice as part of maintaining that relationship, because the more a journalist goes to you and you have interesting, valuable things to say, even when it's something you weren't necessarily prepared for as a topic, then they'll be more inclined to come back to you. So having that in your toolkit is a useful thing. But again, make an assessment too, though, because you don't want to, go so far out on a limb on a topic you don't know anything about, and it's okay to not know everything, and maybe pass it off to an allied organization or something that has more expertise in it, and that's fine too. And yeah, all that to say, in terms of the basics, as many of you have touched on, we'll be getting a little bit more in this workshop into how we can use media to engage the public in the campaigns and organizing we're doing, how we can use media outreach to get more people to our events, and how we can use media engagement to change opinions and win political arguments and change the discourse, and ultimately, as we're collectively trying to do, break through the silence, both in terms of the climate silence and the media silence on the climate crisis. So I'll just go to Becky. Go ahead.
Sorry, could you just review the who, what, when, where, why, and then
Yeah.
the last one, I don't know.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to say I should say.
Yeah, no, the other ones I sort of threw in as my own little addendums of how and WTF. So how is often context, and so if it's a more complex issue, you can get into how something came about, or if there's a bit of an interesting political story or history to the organizing you're doing, or the issue you're trying to highlight, that can be valuable. And the WTF is just that sometimes there can be a fair bit of absurdity in what we're dealing with, or what we're challenging, and sort of highlighting that absurdity can be a worthwhile thing to do as well. So, with that, I thought it could be helpful to get into a little bit of discussion about media advisories. And has anyone here written a media advisory before? Just quick show of hands. Yeah, seeing a couple people. So someone who's written one before want to chime in quickly. What's the purpose of a media advisory? Why do we do those?
Well, to notify the media about an event that's coming up soon, as versus, you'd write a news release for something that's planned and farther ahead. And it's the basics. It's who, what, where, when, and why.
Yeah,
And
that's exactly it.
and depending on, the media landscape in your community, I mean, in some communities, you can send out a media advisory 2 or 3 days before. But in my community, where we only have like 3 or 4 reporters and a bunch of stringers to cover events, it's better to do it maybe 5 or 6, maybe even a week before, if and with as much detail, so that they can arrive with their camera and their tape recorder and they're ready to go.
Absolutely. And if it's something that you're putting out regarding an event or an action that's taking place at a specific place, it really doesn't hurt to add even a link to a map to the place, regardless of whether it feels hard to find to you. The easier you make it, and the less steps there are for the media to figure out where you are, what you're doing, and that kind of thing. The less barriers you create for them or leave for them, the more it increases the kind of coverage. But yeah, that's exactly right. And you can also experiment in terms of the timing. It I've sometimes pushed the envelope a little bit to put out an advisory, a month or two in advance, just to push the envelope and see if that works a little bit. And sometimes it does, depending on, if you have like a high profile event, or a benefit concert, or something that's going to be generating buzz, then going out, getting something out a fair bit sooner can be worthwhile. And it is also worth keeping in mind, well, we often do focus on the daily and weekly news cycle. The one of the benefits of, if there is capacity and time to put out something sooner, there are all of those outlets that publish less frequently, like magazines, where you might have more of a chance of generating some interest from those outlets, with longer lead time, like that. So that's it in a nutshell in terms of advisories. Any questions about that? Yeah, go ahead. Lori, then Becky.
Yeah, I think it's really great if we have a toolkit for June. I don't know if we're creating one, but if we had a toolkit with a template for a media advisory with the details about when to send it and who to, with a template with empty spaces so that we can, because we're older, we're seniors. And so having something that we don't have to craft it that works. I mean, I got one from a forestry protest that we had last November, and it was so effective that I used it again for our World Water Day thing. And I got in all of the media. They all took it up because it was really a great template that was easy for them to reduce or just publish. So if we could have a template about breakthrough the climate silence for June, it would be really helpful.
Absolutely, and in fact, we do, and I'm going to share some of that in this workshop, and you'll all be able to have access to that and use it as much as needed for the work that you're going to be doing. And it essentially mirrors what we're discussing in this workshop in a little more depth, and has templates and tips and tools. And I'll do a bit of a screen share in a little bit so you can see what's in it, but you'll be able to all access that very soon. So yes, absolutely. So ahead, Becky, and then Patricia, and then Leslie Ann.
Yeah, just quickly, I'm wondering how much, or if you expect to hear from everybody that you reach out to, or do you typically
No.
not, or you hear from anybody and just wonder if anyone's going to show up, or what's
No,
the
yeah.
plan?
So there's a combo of things. We'll get into it a little bit more, but it can be good to do a couple different things, including sending out your materials, whether it's an advisory or a press release, which we'll get into in a minute, as widely as possible, and combining that with follow-up emails or phone calls, often even just as basic as confirming they got it, because you might not have the correct email address for them. Their inbox might be full and they might have missed it. There's any number of reasons they might not have seen it. And so a quick follow-up to make sure, at least, to the key folks, it depends on, what your media team's capacity is locally for pitching. But the more journalists you can follow up with, the better. And on top of that, if among the folks that did get it, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be hooked on covering it as a story. So that's an opportunity to pitch them on why it's a valuable news story. And you won't win everyone over, but you can often win some journalists over to covering stuff that they would not have otherwise by doing that kind of follow up. But yeah, I would not count on everyone you send a thing to covering it. Sometimes you can send a press release out to hundreds of journalists and get no coverage, or you can, send it out to one or two journalists and get hundreds of stories, thanks to things like Canadian press syndication. It's a bit of alchemy sometimes. Patricia, go ahead.
I have a question, Don.
Mhm.
What is the difference between a media advisory and a media release?
Yeah. So
How are you gonna?
that's a good segue, and maybe I'll just park that for 1 second just to see what Leslie Ann has to say, and then we'll get into press releases in a second.
Yes, we're very lucky. We have an amazing local newspaper. We're in a unique position here. We want to have a climate cafe, but we're in the southwest corner of Quebec. And I did find on the website the PR stuff, and it's all in English. And our cafe, we're sort of 50-50 English French here. And so we want to have a real, what we call a franglais meeting. So it needs to be in both languages. I'm wondering if you're going to be able to make some bilingual PR stuff
Yeah,
between.
no, that's a very good point, and we can follow up on that and get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Just
much.
before we get on
Yeah.
to releases, I just wanted to say about the timing that here in Victoria, BC, we've got weekly papers that come out on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And their deadlines are like first thing Tuesday mornings. So you have to get things if you want to get pre-publicity for an action.
Mhm.
Like that is an action, an article about your upcoming rally, which we actually fairly frequently get. They have to go out, depends on the where your action is in the week, but it's it is quite a bit of time ahead of time. So I tend to send them out on their publication day when they've just got the paper sent to the printer. They're starting on the next edition.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good reminder, and also reminds me, and another related avenue is papers that have community event listings, and those can have their own timelines as well. So best to keep those in mind too, because that can be a much lower bar, even if you're not having much success in getting coverage. They don't tend to be too restrictive on which events get listed in those sections, so you can often at least get your stuff listed there. So that said, press releases. So advisories we were talking about are often to give a heads up ahead of time to the media that something's going to be happening, and a press release is more in the moment or sometimes after the fact of you're having your day of action. You can put the press release out the morning of with basically telling the story of the day of action and having quotes from some of the spokespeople. You can also do one right after or later in the day that's more of a recap, which is helpful sort of format to share some great photos from the event if you have some as well, because that can also be a little more enticing to media as well, especially in these areas of cuts. If there's a story that's already got a narrative through line and there's photos to go with it, then again makes their job easier to be able to pull a story together based on those raw materials. So essentially the structure of a release, they often talk about like an inverted pyramid. So it's like an article where the bulk of the most pertinent information is in the first paragraph, and the most relevant of that information is in the first sentence. So if it was a story about the week of action coming up, it would be talking right away about seniors breaking through the climate silence and why folks are doing it and that kind of thing. And then the supplementary paragraphs would be some quotes and background information about why that's happening, where it's happening, when, and that kind of thing. So that's the general idea of a solid press release. But that said, I did want to just share a bit of an anecdote on the exceptions to the rule. I still have a vivid memory of the first press release that I sent out when I was embarking on activism a while back now, and that press release pretty much broke every rule that we're talking about. It was it had 3 columns. There were parts of it inexplicably underlined. I don't quite remember why we did that. The contacts for the spokespeople were handwritten in, and there were a number of other things. Essentially, we could have added some crayon on there, and it wouldn't have really been out of place. But I share that because despite all that, we still got a bunch of media coverage, and the reason being, it was about a very timely action that we were doing. It was a very clear story. It had a bit of a David and Goliath kind of element to it, and it was a slow news day, and so I share all that to just sort of remind us of, it is a bit of a cliche to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but there is a truth to it of, you don't need to dwell for eons on trying to ensure you have the perfect press release, because there are, yes, you want it to be good, but there are a lot of factors that go into whether you're going to get coverage or not, and the press release itself is just one of them, and it's obviously you want to fact checked and make sure it's accurate and all of that, but it's often just your foot in the door to getting coverage, and so you don't want to focus on only that to the detriment of the other pieces of the puzzle. And that's the essence of a press release. And again, all of the stuff we're going over is in the media kit, and I'll do a bit of a screen share in a little bit, so you can see some of the templates and things, and you'll be able to get your hands on that. But just wanted to start with a bit of the discussion about it. And any other thoughts or questions on press releases before we move on?
I was just a little surprised when you just ran through quickly that pyramid. I think you said that the details of when and where are at the end and not at the top. Typically is better.
Oh no, closer to I meant closer to the top for those as well. Particularly, it's a little different for the advisory compared to the press release. Definitely for the advisory, you want the when and where very very clear. For the press release, it depends a little bit on whether you're doing a press release that goes out before your event. So say you've sent out an advisory a week in advance. It's the day of action now. You're sending out your press release the morning of your events at 12 or 1, for example. Then in that situation, you do really want to, of course, be very clear when and where it's happening right up front. That said, if you're doing one of those ones like a recap with some photos after the fact, then the when and where isn't as relevant, because it's not that it's not relevant, but it's not decisive to them coming out and covering the event, because the event's already come and gone, and so it's more about the story and the politics of what you're doing at that point. So does that help clarify a little bit?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. And did want to touch briefly on something called availabilities, which is a little less commonly known. Just quick show of hands, anyone familiar with or have done media availabilities? So these are a handy thing that often work well in a situation where you might not have a lot of capacity to on your local team to be necessarily doing a lot of writing of media materials, but you've at least got 1 or 2 people available for interviews. And what an availability is a very brief document or statement. It can be even 1 or 2 sentences along with the contact of your media outreach person or spokesperson that is essentially just saying, this development politically happened today, we're available for comment on it. Or this thing happened today, and here's a quote from us, and we're available for more comment. And so, like, the federal budget comes out, or you can even, put it out before the budget comes out, saying we will be available for comment, or a new pipeline's announced, or a new electrical grid policy is announced. You can whip together 1 or 2 sentences we're available for comment, hit send, and that can often lead to coverage. So you don't necessarily need to have a full, 300 or 400 word press release to get some coverage. You can, you know, in keeping up to speed on local developments, national developments, and responding to them in a timely way like that can lead to coverage as well. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that events. I don't know if you've been following the analysis of what's happening with the El Nino weather pattern and
Exactly.
how on top of global warming, chances are there will be some local climate disasters happening this summer, and those are key events when you're
Yeah,
trying to break the climate silence.
absolutely. And so that's a really valuable and relatively easy tool for media outreach to only need to put together a sentence or two. You do want to have a sense of like if it turns into an interview or if you want to put the quote right in there, what it is that you're wanting to say about what's happening. But that said, it is a relatively low bar way of getting your foot in the door of potentially getting some coverage and responding to stuff that's in the news cycle. So we do in a lot of ways focus on creating events like the Week of Action that we're doing in June, but we can also be responding to events that emerge, and sometimes that can also be helpful as part of promoting upcoming events that we're organizing as well, depending on how much space there is to get into that in the coverage. So that's that. Unless there's anything more on those, I was hoping to get into letters to the editor and op-eds, but just wanted to do a quick check-in to see if there's any questions or thoughts about what we've covered so far. I know we're sort of going through at a breakneck pace, but again, not to worry. Like you don't need to be memorizing all of this. I'm hoping this is just a useful exercise to familiarize or refamiliarize ourselves with all of these key tools and tips, and then you'll be able to dive in again more once you take a look through the toolkit and get into more depth. So not seeing any hands. So letters to the editor. Who here has had a letter published? I want to talk briefly, and anyone feel free to jump in. What was it about? What worked? Why'd they publish it? Lori, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I'm in a small city. Penticton is only 40,000 people, and we've got two paper media, and they also do online. And we have a few online media. And when we do letters to the editor, we send them out to each of them, usually separately, so that they're not BCC'd or CC'd. And we've had very good luck with different topics because they need stuff. They need letters. They want letters. And they say to do 400 words max or 500 word max, but I find that if you're able to keep it at 200 words or so with just the short sentences, okay, short. I usually do short sentences to the point with a beginning and outrage or whatever, and then maybe a call to action. It depends on what it is. Sometimes I'm just really angry and that's what comes out, but it often gets published because they do want them. And so I find them really valuable. And when we have letter writing groups where we get together about a certain action, they will excuse me, they will sometimes run them on different days rather than all on one day. And so I didn't think they were pretty effective, but they can really get a lot of traction.
Yeah, absolutely. Anne, you had some thoughts?
Yes, I've published letters to the editor too, usually in response to an issue. And our media here is in a rather sad state. It's Post Media. It's a subsidiary now of Post Media. So the orientation is pretty right wing. And I have found, well, you know, for us, the word limit is 300 words max, and they're hard on that. But I have found that in the letters that I have written, particularly those that have dealt with why we shouldn't be exploring small modular reactors or large nuclear. I live 40 kilometers from a nuclear reactor, nuclear power station. I have had to have sources for every single sentence. And even then they will come back at me and want more. But I have never not been published. But I have found that it's quite a lot of work, because if you're particularly taking a position that is offside of the, you know, the narrative, which is predominantly right wing and very pro development, no matter what, they want proof like you wouldn't believe. But I have been published, which was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it does depend on the paper, so or the media outlet. It's really good to see if you can find on their website what their submission guidelines are, including when to submit, who to submit to, as well as the length. A lot of papers will have limits between 150 and 250 words. Sometimes, you know, it sort of depends on the point you're trying to make. Sometimes you need more space to have a more nuanced or more robust argument for what you're trying to say. But sometimes short and sweet works too. And generally, you will have better odds with a shorter letter, because they'll publish more of the shorter ones than the longer ones. But also, it is worth keeping in mind, you know, one of the things about the letter and comments sections is that even when your letter isn't published, they do keep track of how many people are submitting stuff, taking a particular position on a particular issue, and that does influence their editorial positioning on different issues. So even when you're not published by submitting a letter to the editor, especially if a bunch of people in the community and you may sometimes want to organize letter writing campaigns, then that's a way of shifting the media towards breaking the climate silence as well, just by sheer volume of letter to the editor submissions. And it can also help, especially given the length, keeping it topical, not going on too many tangents, being witty and snarky, if you have it in you, can help. Not going overboard necessarily, but a little bit can pique their interest and make it interesting for them to run as well. Any other thoughts on or questions on letters before we move on? And yeah, again, there is stuff on both this and op-eds in the toolkit. That said, it's often best to use the talking points that are available and adapt them into something that's in your own voice, rather than copy paste kind of approach to letters and op-eds. It just tends to ring more true and has a better chance of getting picked up. And op-eds themselves are similar in some ways to letters, but because they're longer, you do have more space to have a more developed argument. But before we get into it in a little more detail, just wanted to open it up again for folks who've worked on op-eds or submitted, or maybe even had some published. Anyone have any luck with that? Catherine Jane, go ahead.
Yeah. I had one, actually, this was quite a few years ago. I had one published on transit. But I belong to an organization called Nanaimo Climate Action Hub, and members of our organization have submitted op-eds, and they've been accepted. And it's just, our local newspaper is really short-staffed. Like, they only have about 304 reporters for a city of 110,000. So it's they're grateful if someone can supply them with well-written op-ed pieces, and if it's well researched and it has a non-confrontational tone, they'll usually be accepted.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone want to chime in on why an op-ed? Why would you do an op-ed instead of a press release, for example?
Well, I could speak to that. The reason we did an op-ed was because the city was debating whether to introduce, it's called a zero carbon step code, but what it essentially meant was that new builds wouldn't be allowed to put in infrastructure for gas heating. And the province had legislated to do that by 2030, but some municipalities were doing it earlier, and we wanted Nanaimo to do it earlier. And it was a complex issue, and it needed to be explained to the public, because people hear the term zero carbon step code and their minds go blank. Mine goes blank. So, and I knew something about it. So this op-ed, which was written by the chair of the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub, explained it in terms that people could understand, and why it was a good idea, and why people should support their city council taking this action.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good example. So an op-ed is often about explaining a new or a complex issue. It can be an existing issue, but you're trying to reframe the political debate about it, and that can be a valuable time. But really, it does sort of get to that sort of it's sort of a combination of public education and trying to win people over to our perspective on a given thing. And there's just more space to do that in an op-ed than in a press release. With op-eds, depending on the paper, you can have somewhere between 600 to 800 words, whereas press releases are often 300 words and not too much more than that. So there's only so much that you can cram in there. Any other thoughts or questions about op-eds, and could be related to when to do them, what to do them about?
How do you get them into the paper? I mean, they
Mhm.
don't always accept them. So what's the method to engage the editor?
Yeah, I think Catherine Jane has a thought on that.
Yeah, we basically pitched the idea to the news editor, and on the basis that this is a subject of a lot of debate, and city council is going to be voting on this. And because our organization had a fairly high profile in the community, the fact that the chair of our organization was willing to write this, meant that they were willing to, accommodate us, or at least, read what we had to provide. And I think that's the whole thing. I think op-eds, if they tie into a particular issue that's a lot of people are talking about, like maybe there's a rezoning of a favorite park area for development, and people are really upset about it, and city council has to vote on the rezoning. If you write an op-ed on why it's important to keep these green spaces, it will be likely to be accepted, because people are already keen and interested in that topic. So, Dylan mentioned that earlier, that if you can tie it to current things that are in the news or that are being discussed, that will make it more saleable to an editor.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, where I am, particularly for the daily paper, the Times Colonist, the senior editors are pretty hostile to any climate content. So it really helps to, I tend to time my op-ed contributions, or I'm more likely to write an op-ed, um, say in August or during the Christmas holidays, submit it during a time when the senior editors are away. Because we have enemies and they're the senior editors.
That is a good bit of advice, and it gets back to knowing the schedule of your local newsroom and when certain people are
When
on
they're on
vacation.
holiday.
Yeah, no, I love that level of familiarity with the newsroom. That's great. And in addition to all of that, it can also help having it depends on the outlet, how many authors they'll let you have. Some are quite strict and they'll say only one or maybe two. Some don't mind having a handful. But at any rate, having a subject matter expert. So if like you're talking about, electrification of the grid, someone who's like deeply familiar with that, where, they've got academic background or policy expertise, or they've been at it quite some time, can be more on the narrative side, someone with an interesting story, like a personal story related to this, someone with some profile, and that gets back to like what was said around like the chairperson of an organization. But if you're able to connect with someone who's say an author or a personality, that's it's you can sort of reach as far as you may want, and it sort of depends on the nature of the event. Sometimes for the kind of promotion we're talking about, where we have this week of action coming up in June, it can be worth thinking through. Okay, well, maybe you have some speakers lined up for your event, depending on what it is you're doing, and would it make sense for one or two of them to co-author an op-ed, and sort of another tack related to what Eric was saying when. The editors are a little more hostile to climate stuff is sort of using economics or inequality or something else that's topical as a starting point, that you can then branch into what you want to say about climate, and that can be a way through that as well. But again, that does sort of depend on the level of hostility. I don't know that based on what Eric's saying, if that would necessarily work for those editors. It may just be better to wait for them to go on vacation rather than try that approach. But again, it depends on what kind of rapport you have with the folks there. So, anything else on op-eds or written stuff in general before we move on to getting into some verbal skills? Eric?
Yeah, I've found it can be quite helpful to have like an interesting diversity of authors. Say somebody, well, in this case, we're seniors, right? If we can get a young person, high school student, and a senior, those kinds of things kind of lend interest to the stories, or geographical spread. We've done, Council of Canadian chapters have done op-eds signed from somebody from a big city, somebody from a small town, somebody from Vancouver Island, and so yeah, think about who you get to sign it, and those don't have to be the people who wrote it. Quite often they only read it and add their name.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of unusual suspects approach definitely can go a long way to piquing their interest, and that goes for beyond just op-eds too. It's worth considering in terms of the events you're organizing, and if you're having speakers at your event, structuring things that way. Similarly for press releases and whatnot. In terms of the overarching narrative, whether the medium is a press release or an op-ed or what have you, having that kind of diversity of voices that Eric's talking about can be really valuable, both for getting media coverage, but also for building the movement. Because the more folks from various movements and various parts of the movement working together, the better. Becky, go ahead.
If you wanted to get a statement from an organization like, say, SCAN's state militarism and climate statement that we talked about a few days ago, would you submit that as an op-ed, or I mean, is that something that can be submitted somehow to the editors and printed across the country, or is it better just locally? I don't know.
I think it's possible, but in my experience, it's less likely if it's an organizational statement. I have seen some community papers will publish organizational statements as op-eds, but generally you're likely going to have more luck if it's got specific authors, specific people attached to it.
Okay.
But that said, a statement like that could be adapted, and often it can be a good subject for an op-ed to talk about this statement. There's these organizations, or if it's an open letter or what have you, came out with this statement, and the op-ed can be about not necessarily the op-ed being the statement itself, but talking about the statement, what's in it, and why it's significant, and similar for a press release as well. And that's how you can get some coverage about it. So with that, thought it would be helpful to move on to some verbal skills, and that's just shorthand for talking about things like pitching, interviews, and press conferences, which go hand in hand with the things that we've been talking about, where once you've sent them written materials, if you are successful to some degree, at least in getting their interest, you'll end up talking to some folks. So wanted to start with pitching. We talked about that little bit, and wanted to get into when to do it, how to do it, who to follow up with, and for what purposes or what reasons. And has anyone here done some pitching and would like to share any of your experience about that?
Hmm.
If not, I can jump right in. Yeah, Catherine Jane, go ahead.
Well, I've done some pitching, but not for environmental stuff. So, but I think the general principles are the same. You first of all you have to find the right person to send the pitch to, and then again you try and tie it to something that's actually happening. For example, I think we're all expecting it's going to be a major wildfire season this summer. And if you can find someone, I don't know, if John Valent's coming to your community to talk about wildfires, you say to them, this person who's an expert on this topic is coming, and is being sponsored by our organization, and he's available for interviews if you would like to talk to him, and so forth, that kind of thing. Actually, I can think of one occasion, our organization had a climate conference, and Seth Klein was a major speaker, and we pitched the idea to a local independent radio station that did an interview with him. The local newspaper, of course, covered it as an event, and actually gave us very good coverage. We were really, really happy with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, what you're pitching and what that looks like is really kind of based on what we were just talking about. So if you're pitching an advisory, for example, you would want to be for all of these, you want to make sure it's going to the right person. So that's of course the first thing. But assuming you get to that point, you're talking with the person or corresponding with the person who is the right person, then seeing if they can be convinced to cover it, and if so, then you can sort of check them off the list and build a bit of a list of who's said they'll be coming out to cover the event. If it's a press release, it's who might do a story on it, and lining up interviews, or sometimes there can be back and forth in terms of context to the story. They may have clarifying questions that could inform whether they will cover it. There could be other news stories of the day that aren't necessarily the wild cards we talked about, but can be competing for airtime, and so that's where making as compelling a case for why what you're pitching is the most newsworthy thing is a valuable a way to approach it, and for op-eds, it's the opinions editors or their counterparts when they're on vacation, uh, and that's the essence of it. But again, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but just to reiterate, firstly, making sure that it got to the right person. So that's getting through, making sure that the email address itself was correct and did get to a journalist, but then also confirming whether the journalist that it got to is the one who has that portfolio, or at least on the day, and making sure it's someone who's covering climate and not business or not traffic, or whatever it happens to be, and clarifying that kind of thing. There are a couple ways to do it. You can pitch by email, and it can be effective. But if you have time and capacity, phone is ideal, because there's just the reality that you're not going to have to worry about typos in email addresses and that kind of thing, and you can actually confirm with someone verbally whether they are in fact the right person, rather than waiting to hear back from someone and not knowing when that might be. But it can be helpful to ahead of time, just being really clear about what it is you're going to try and say, and recognizing that they don't have a whole lot of time. And so thinking of it like imagining they have the busiest day of their life, and so you have one or two sentences to to say to them before they hang up on you, and you may very well have more time than that, but taking that approach will at least make sure you're less likely to get shut out entirely, and they may need to run off to their meeting, or finish up on a deadline, but if you've at least piqued their interest, then even so, that there's a decent chance they'll come back to you after they've put out whatever other brush fires that they're dealing with. And there is another important part to pitching we will get to momentarily, and that's how do we actually build lists of who we're pitching to and sending things to, but we'll get to that momentarily as well. But otherwise, in terms of pitching, any other thoughts or questions or experiences anyone would like to share from pitching? Okay, maybe we'll leave it at. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to say that for the most part, pitching to individual reporters is something I do mostly by text and on social media.
Yeah,
So
that works too, for sure.
if you've got an active social media presence, and if you've accumulated people's cell phone numbers, it's a way of pinging them, and quite often it's just a link to the media release or whatever, and just saying, just pinging you to let you know and make sure that you saw this in your email.
Yeah. Absolutely. And many journalists are very active on social media, so definitely if you're active there too, worthwhile to use that avenue as well. Thanks for that. And interviews. So this will depend on who on your team is going to be the spokesperson for what you're doing. But whether it's you or someone else, it's good to think through ahead of time how you want to get your message across, and ensuring in the pitching and the discussion or correspondence or what have you, with the journalist, you have a sense of what kind of interview you're going to be doing. Is it a 2-minute interview? Is it a 15-minute interview? Having a better sense of what range of things they may want to cover to the extent possible. But really like having at least a sense of like how long it'll be, especially if it's a live radio or TV interview, then then that gives you the ability to think through how much space you have to use to get your message across. And so if you have, you know, 10 points that you want to make, you're not necessarily going to squeeze those into a 2-minute interview, especially if that 2-minute interview is a pre-recorded interview, you might even just get one soundbite out of that, or one sentence quote, and so you don't want that quote to be necessarily meandering off into the weeds of some very tangentially related thing to what your core message is that you're trying to get across. So the point being, the shorter the interview, you want to really stick to your core messages. But even in longer ones, you do want to always bring it back, because if it's not live, they're editing it or moving things around, and so things can either get taken out of context, or you can sometimes give them too much to work with, and then they choose the quotes that you wouldn't necessarily have chosen for the story. Not that they're necessarily bad quotes, but for example, if you're trying to get a story about breaking through the climate silence, and then you have a number of things you say that don't touch on that at all, then it can lead to a story or to quotes that sort of miss the main thing that you were trying to get across. And so it's on the one hand, for a shorter interview, you want to really try and stick to the main talking points. For a longer one, you can elaborate, but try to do so in ways that do bring it back to that core message, or reinforce the core message in pretty intentional ways. And so it can be helpful to practice that ahead of time, with a little role playing with folks on your team, with someone pretending to be the journalist, and sometimes, depending on the nature of the interview, sometimes it can be helpful for someone to role play as a bit more of a hostile journalist, or at least like not on side, to help you prepare for, you're not always going to get softball questions necessarily, and so it can be helpful to practice how you might respond to tough questions, if and when they do come up, and that can be really useful as well. There are, of course, many different contexts of interviews, but maybe I'll go to Eric and Lori first before we get into that. Go ahead.
You're first, Lori.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say that I have learned that when you're asked a contentious question, sometimes it's really great to say, we hear that, but we're here for this reason. Because you don't want to engage in crazy stuff, and you don't want them to dominate the conversation with climate trash. And so just acknowledging that they spoke to you and say, this action is about this focus today, and this is what we are working on. It really helps. And it also makes you feel quite empowered to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really touches on there's an old adage in media relations of, you don't answer the question that was asked necessarily, you answer the question that you want to answer, which is what Lori's getting at. And that again, that's just bringing it back to your core message and using the sometimes an outlandish question as a segue to bring it back to the core message. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I find it helpful not to separate the mainstream media and the social media work, so that, say you're doing an event and you're expecting the media to come soon, that's a great time for somebody to grab a camera, a phone, and get you to give your key point um, to the camera to be posted in your 30-second format on social media. And that way maybe you try it 5 times. You've just practiced what you want to say to the mainstream media too. And you pick the best one to post on your social media. And that for me, I find it much easier to have somebody holding the camera and talking to me than rather than trying to do this crazy selfie thing that social media influencers do. It's just much more human to have somebody prompt you with the question and hold the camera.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, it's a good way to practice as well, even if it's a situation where media isn't there yet, or to just get your message out there to followers as well. And th those are some of the sort of o overarching things to keep in mind. It is also good to or helpful to familiarize yourself with the sort of nuances of the different uh formats and the idiosyncrasies of them, where like if you're doing a phone interview with a reporter for a newspaper story, it can often feel less pressured than a live TV appearance. And so uh, I recommend it, depending on how comfortable you are with that kind of thing, practicing relaxation techniques can be good, especially depending on how if the host may be combative, but just generally in both situations, it can be really helpful to just you know, sometimes resist the reflex to just respond instantaneously. Take a beat to just uh, think through what it is you want to say and want to say in response to the questions, and that can go a long way to helping you stay on course. And in some ways, that's true across the different kinds of uh, mediums, whether it's print or radio or TV. And so we talked a little bit about combative hosts, and again that gets back to answering the question you want to answer, and not the question that was asked. Because sometimes it could be a red herring or straw man argument to try and derail what it is you're trying to say. But sometimes it's not even necessarily nefarious, but sometimes it could just be, something that's tangential that came up in the news in the past week that's not necessarily topical, and then that just, is a moment to say that, as was pointed out, this is really the important issue we need to be talking about right now. Was someone did someone have something to add there? Okay. Um, So, otherwise, just wanted to briefly touch on press conferences. Th This is not something you're necessarily going to want to do all the time, but there can be good moments for it. It can sort of serve not dissimilar role from media advisory sometimes. So, like if you're doing you have an event coming up, then when use of a press conference can be, the kinds of folks that you would maybe be quoting in the press release that comes out on the day of, or speaking at the event, to do in advance of an event to try and get some advance media coverage to promote it. But it can also be the kind of thing where, say a government report comes out saying, yeah, it would actually be bad to further electrify our system, and then you might want to do a press conference to respond to how absurd a position that kind of thing is, or whatever it happens to be. So there are a few different purposes, but one of them is it can be a ready-made thing of, if something is feeling like it's newsworthy, then doing a press conference increases the chances of some TV or radio coverage, because it's giving outlets a ready-made audio and visual content that they can use for stories about something that is timely, whether it is responding to a government thing or whether it's promoting an event or action or campaign that you were doing. And generally, you want to keep them not super long, 10 or 15 minutes in terms of the time the speakers take up, and leaving time for questions from the reporters, and the location sort of depends on what it is that you're trying to get some coverage about. And speakers, you don't want too many necessarily, somewhere between 2 and 3 or 4 people, maybe, depending on the nature of the thing, and that's sort of the essence of it. But any thoughts or questions or experiences to share about press conferences from folks who've been involved, or even if you haven't, if you have some questions about them, that's totally cool too. Catherine, Jane, and then Leslie Ann.
Yeah, I'm sorry I keep butting in, but I've been told that calling them press conferences can get up the nose of people in the electronic media. So calling them media conferences is
Absolutely.
maybe a way of skirting that. Although we still talk about press releases, but
Yeah, and you can also call them media releases for that matter too. It definitely is a good point, and not each and every media outlet is a press media outlet.
yeah.
Yeah, Leslie Ann, go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything to say.
Oh, okay.
I left my coordinates in the chat there, so that if you can help us with some bilingual media, that would be awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
So we've got just a little bit more ground to cover, and I thought I would just share in the chat here, and we'll email it out too, just so folks have it. But this is um, the media toolkit, and I'll just do a quick screen share here so we can quickly walk through it. There we go. Can everyone see that okay? So this is the toolkit. Basically covers a lot of what we're just talking about in terms of the key media outreach tools, some highlights of what kinds of things to keep in mind when we're doing letters to the editor or op-eds, press releases, media advisories. It's got a bit of an action list for thinking through the process of how to go about securing media coverage. So identifying your local media contacts. We'll do what we can to help. We do have some access to media lists that aren't super up to date, and we're going to be working on updating those. But also it's good to look into your local media outlets, and if you haven't already, start building a spreadsheet. So So just sort of thinking of it in the course of, if you're reading or following stories and they're covering climate or even if it's, marginally related to it and it seems like a reporter that'd be open to covering climate, then making a note of them and trying to track down their contact info and add that to your local spreadsheet so that you can send the folks in your community in the newsrooms your media advisories and your media releases, and that's the sort of ongoing year-round thing that's good to do. And if you haven't already, designating media spokespeople, in ensuring who that's going to be, and that they know what everyone's on the same page in terms of the talking points and the main messages you're trying to get across. And then, as we talked about, the local media advisory, getting good photos and videos if you can, and release after the action. And it's got the stuff about the day in the life of a newsroom that we talked about. Some key things about letters to the editor and op-eds and media advisories. There's also a template here that you can use to just plug in the details for your local events, and similar for the press release. It's got some sample quotes which you can adjust as you see fit, depending on who the spokespeople are that you're quoting in the press release. They may want to adjust that a little bit, and it goes into the talking points that Seniors for Climate has developed for the Breaking Through the Climate Silence campaign, that you can use for all of the various media outreach stuff that we've been talking about. There's some core messages and reinforcing messages, and also we're here to help. So if you have questions after this, and after you've had a chance to look through the media toolkit, do feel free to reach out and let us know, and we'll do our best to follow up, and we may still be doing a little bit of updating here and there on the toolkit if there are other areas that would be helpful to add to that. And in addition, we'll of course be doing some national media outreach to supplement the work that you'll all be doing in your communities for the week of action. And all that said, in terms of just getting back to building your media lists, as I was saying, whoever is doing media monitoring for your team, whether it's someone designated or that you have just one or two people who are always reading the news, just making sure that part of that flight path is not just reading the stories, but copying the names of the reporters who are writing or producing those stories, to make sure that those folks get added to your lists. And also after you've done events, looking at who's covered that. You may already have had direct contact with them because you've been doing media outreach, but sometimes you can get coverage from folks who you haven't had contact from. They might just have heard about it and shown up on the day of. So it's good to double check on the coverage and the bylines to make sure that folks who have covered your events have been added to your lists. And it can also be helpful to, after the fact, assess the impact of your efforts. So like looking at the coverage of your events, seeing if it was what you had hoped for, and if there were there things that could have been done differently in terms of the various things that we've talked about. Sometimes not, but sometimes there are lessons we can learn from that, and can be helpful to have at least one person who's sort of responsible for managing a local media spreadsheet, because with media cuts to newsrooms, people moving to different jobs or at different outlets, there can be pretty high turnover, and so if you can have or build the capacity, or just keep it in mind to try and update that as frequently as you can, then it's going to be worth its weight in gold in terms of just having that as a resource. You can send an advisory or a release to, and know that it's at least getting to live journalists and not bouncing back whether or not they're the right person for covering that story on the day of, as we talked about, is another thing. But at least making sure they're actively employed at the given outlet that you're trying to reach as a baseline is a good thing. We will wrap up momentarily, but just have a question or something from Lori first. So go ahead, Lori.
Thank you so much. The toolkit's great. It's a little text text dense, and we're seniors, and we work better with large font. And I know you're not a senior yet, but we work better with large font, breaks, and headings and highlights to help us find things. I do have a question. I do see wonderful social media posts, and I'm wondering if there's going to be like a file folder where we are able to access them so that we can go and download something that has already been created by whoever is doing this amazing stuff, to be able to share it easier, if there's some way that we can do that, because screenshots don't work on Instagram, and I'm a senior and so I work on my computer, not on my phone. So if there's a folder with those kinds of graphics that have been created, it would be really helpful for us to amplify this
Yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. And that is either in the works or has been completed. And if it hasn't been shared around yet, it will be soon. But yeah, that's definitely been on the radar. So if that hasn't gone around yet, you'll have it soon. So if there's nothing else, maybe we'll leave it at that for now. And again, thanks so much for joining us and sharing all your great experience in this discussion as well. And do keep us posted on how it's all going with the media outreach for the week of action. And definitely appreciate your all of your feedback and thoughts. We'll keep that into account. And it is a bit of a living document, so we'll keep working on that. And yeah, and also if you have any questions or just want to check in about how things are going in the lead up to the week of action, please do feel free to reach out, and we'll do our best to help out as we can. So again, thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you in the week of action and beyond.